I really realized I don't care what the mind does.
Yeah.
The mind can do anything and it won't perturb me. The heart can do anything and it won't perturb me. It won't knock me off. And then indirectly, the mind settles down because the game is up. You will gain social freedom by figuring out freedom. I'm more Dan than I ever was because,
Yeah.
right, that expression is completely free and unrestricted.
Yeah. That
Right.
is freedom, when you
Yeah.
can be whoever
Yeah.
you are.
We will find the success that we want by worldly measures by first finding the success that we need at the
Mhm.
supramundane level, at the non-dual level. If we don't, then our success in the world will be short-lived because it's built on sand.
Hello, friends. In this episode, I'm talking to Dan Goldfield, who is living and breathing freedom, psychological, mental, and also financial freedom. Dan has a similar story as I have, and that's why it was so confirming seeing that someone can be that fulfilled and that successful. And he's in a happy marriage. He's in a state of real fulfillment. I'm lucky to have met Dan, and I'm happy to share this episode with you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fredosophy, another episode. We've done 5 or 6, maybe this is the 6th or 7th. Today, I'm really excited because I'm here with a fellow European who has a lot of things in common with me. I found Dan Goldfield here through Artem. Whoops, I forgot to memorize his last name.
Boitsov.
Was Boitsov
Boitsov.
channel, and I loved the energy that was between those two guys. And Dan seems like a really grounded person being, and he seems free. What's interesting is he seems free in more than just one way or a mental way, but also he's teaching financial freedom also, if that's fair to say, Dan. And
Sure.
I've coached a lot of guys when it comes to social freedom and also mental freedom, psychological freedom, if I avoid using the word spiritual freedom. Uh,
Yeah, I
but
like to stay clear of that one if I can.
yeah, yeah, your customer base will like split in half.
Indeed.
Um, but um, uh, but but I haven't really taught financial freedom before, so we're definitely going to go into that also. But I also want to know some things about your um, journey towards awakening,
Mm,
for lack of a more mainstream word. But
mm, mm.
um, I'd love to. Yeah, I look forward to this chat.
Me too. Me too. And hey, the semantics are interesting, right? That word spiritual means so many different things to so many different people. Nonetheless,
Yeah.
sometimes it's unavoidable, right? It does point to a category of things that what I find is people have a sense of what it points to. And so sometimes when I'm writing or speaking at a very kind of top broad level, sometimes it is actually the best word to use, although at a deeper level, I would prefer to steer clear of it because when we get into philosophical inquiries about, well, what is the spirit? Could you point to it? Then it just
Uh-huh.
it's a minefield, right?
Yeah, yeah. I use it in my mind
Right.
um, a lot, and then depending on who is listening, and even if I'm meeting a teacher or someone who talks about it, I still want to check, do they use the word a lot?
Mm,
and see what kind of words do they use, and
mm, mm,
anything
mm.
I say will be misinterpreted. What does awakening mean, for example? What does
Indeed.
ego mean, or what does mind mean? What does consciousness mean?
Indeed.
So
Indeed.
yeah,
Yeah. Important
but I think
questions.
we're not too far away from each
Yeah, I think so.
other.
Seems that way. Seems that way.
I don't know if you said there was a shift, but uh, it seems like there was to me.
Mm,
And
mm, mm.
what led up to this transformation?
Sure. So I suppose I could say there were many shifts. I mean, it would be difficult to, I suppose one comes to mind as the major shift,
Yeah.
which occurred uh, following years of dedicated practice under a Theravada teacher
Yeah.
when I, following that period, entered deeply into non-dual teachings and practices.
So Vipassana or that kind of teaching, Theravada.
So I was in Theravada to begin with. I mean, there were always many influences in the mix, as is almost always the case for a 21st century practitioner, right? But the teacher that I spent the most time with was a Theravada teacher in the Thai forest lineage. His name is Dhammarato. He lived with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa at Wat Suan Mok for 8 years. And I had the great privilege and pleasure of working with Dhammarato one to one for hundreds of hours over Skype. And I went out and visited and learned tons. But it was when I then took what I'd learned there, or I suppose I could say dropped what I learned there. Actually,
Okay.
rather, it was a dropping rather than a taking, uh,
Ah,
stepping fully into non-duality practices was where things really shifted in a kind of a conclusive way. And actually, our friend Artem was deeply, deeply helpful in that transition.
right.
Artem
Right.
also helped me to drop forms altogether. So I'd been in, although Dhammarato's presentation of Theravada is very modern and very lean, he's certainly not one for ritual. For me, there was still, and perhaps this is just the way that my Western mind grasped it, there was still some deliberate doing involved. And it was in the letting go of that that I would say the biggest shift occurred. Now, it's of endless fascination to me, brother, whether or not I had to engage in those more deliberate, more relativistic practices first in order to lay the ground for that non dual teaching to hit me in as profound a way as it did. Certainly, when we look out across the data that we have, all the wisdom traditions and the many, many practitioners over the ages, we see very often, don't we, that a map is laid that encourages the practitioner to first engage in relativistic practices, deliberate practices, and then to move to non dual practices later. All we can really say for sure is that that was my path. I did that modern presentation of Theravada first, and then I relaxed into non duality, and that was where the biggest shift occurred.
Right. Yeah. It
Mm,
seems like it takes a while for most people to get ready, so to speak,
mm,
to understand the implications of the non-dual principles.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
it can be really confusing to someone who
Hmm.
hasn't learned to calm down the mind, or to see what a
Indeed,
thought is, or look at a thought. Um,
indeed.
and
Yeah.
then yeah, so but yeah,
Mm.
who knows what's necessary? It's
Well,
different for people.
this is even more fascinating to me. I can talk about questions about my own journey, but if we zoom out and look at all practitioners everywhere, this question of what is necessary is the real big one. I mean, that to me is endlessly fascinating again.
Mm.
Yet more so, I would say, than my individual journey. And the best conclusion I've come to thus far is, of course, there's no one size fits all.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it must be true that the non-dual teaching could hit someone's ear who's never heard a lick of Dharma and it make abundantly perfect sense to them and they're liberated. And actually, there's stories of this kind of thing happening in some of the suttas, right? Um, if we play the game of statistics, then we see that, yes, as you said, most practitioners walk along a path. There is a appearance of a development that occurs to an individual, and then at the ultimate fruition of that practitioner's journey, they see that there was never an individual at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
And so there couldn't have been a journey. It's trippy. It's trippy.
Yeah. Oof. Yeah. Like you're suddenly you're seeing that you couldn't have done anything else than what you
Yeah.
were doing,
Yeah.
in a trippy way, I can imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that
The great
yeah,
mystery.
it's a great mystery. Yeah. How I'm curious, still, relatively speaking, how long were you in the relative or the Theravada or the kind of um,
Mm.
practical practices, and how long were you in the non-dual practice?
So the timeline looks something like around 2014, I did my first guided meditation. That was when
Yeah.
I started to dabble, started to uh, open myself to the possibility that meditation, mindfulness, Dharma might be a solution.
Uh,
Um, 2015, I began engaging in a practice called Alexander Technique.
yeah, right. I remember you were
Familiar with
talking about.
Alexander Technique?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. You've kind of
I'm not
heard
familiar,
about
but
that
I
already.
remember you talk
Okay,
about it.
okay. So Alexander Technique itself is something very specific and very niche, and it's a whole other rabbit hole. So feel free to ask questions if you want to go down that rabbit hole, but I'll keep it brief for now.
Yeah.
The easiest way to wrap it into my journey is to say it has a lot in common with mindfulness practices. There is uh, a quality of mindfulness that is necessary for the practice of Alexander Technique, a quality of attention. Okay.
You see,
So that was 2015. Then I met Dhammarato in 2016, and that's when things really started to kick off.
right?
I haven't accurately dated. Oh, I guess it must have been 2018. Could have been early 2019 that I discovered a Sangha here in Bristol in the lineage of a Dzogchen teacher named Ziji Rinpoche. And I started going to those meetings. And it was around that time that I was enjoying hanging out with Artem as well, and he was greatly helpful
Yeah.
in dissolving what was left to dissolve. And so there was a period of careful experimentation, I would say, having been invested in that Theravada practice for so long at that time and very intensely. There was a lot of tension around that time regarding which practice do I want to do because they're not entirely compatible, at least not in the way that they were presented.
Ah,
In the end, I decided to experiment with the practice that Ziji Rinpoche was recommending, which is simply to rest naturally without seeking or describing anything, the ultimate non-dual instruction. And everything was blown wide open. So that's the
wow.
timeline. And then after that, it was a process of cross-referencing, I would say. I'd already been encouraged to teach by Dhammarato. Dhammarato gave me lineage and encouraged me to teach. I was hesitant at first. I felt a great sense of responsibility for working with people who are coming to the Dharma. You know, they're often in vulnerable positions, deep existential questions.
Yeah.
So I hesitated, and I began a process of cross-referencing my understanding with other understandings. You know, again, like any 21st century practitioner, there'd always been a lot of influences in the mix. And so, okay, the Japanese say sit this way, the Tibetans say sit that way, the Thai folks say sit that way, meditate this way, meditate that way, practice moment to moment this way, do mantra, don't do much. Like, there's so many takes
Yeah.
on what it takes. And so I really wanted to be very careful. And a huge piece that came in later in 2019 was that I met my wife, who has 3 degrees in psychology. So we started comparing notes, and she did a lot to ground and confirm my understanding from the academic perspective. And once I had that piece, then I felt like, okay, I've done my homework. I've got something robust here that is stripped of any remaining superstition and is ready to take out to the world.
And it happened around that time, the
Yeah.
final
So,
shift for you.
well, yeah, I would say just before I met my wife. So, mid 2019, I would
Yeah.
say. I remember a walk back from one of Ziji Rinpoche's sanghas. Now, Ziji Rinpoche was never there. It was teachers that she was training who were delivering the teachings at that sangha. I never actually met Ziji Rinpoche, which is a great shame. Maybe one day.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm sure she would be happy.
oh, I hope so. Yeah, I'd certainly be happy to see her. Um, I remember a walk home in which recognition of what the Tibetans call Rigpa took place, recognition of self-knowing awareness as the ground of being,
Yeah.
and everything changed. I saw my see, I'd had glimpses of my identity as temporary, as fleeting, but in the context of those more deliberate practices, right? So meditation experiences in which I saw anatta, in which I saw impermanence. And then
Right.
certainly there was some recognition of that in moment to moment mindfulness.
Yeah.
But that full recognition of awareness as the ground of being recontextualized everything. Oh, there never was a practitioner. There never was a practice. There never was anything to meditate on. There never was anything to realize. There
Right.
is just this, and there's only ever been this. And it's that simple. But as you say, very difficult for one who's uninitiated or one who's in an ongoing process of practice to recognize that in a moment. So indeed, it
Uh-huh.
was that whole journey that I went on. We can certainly say was the shape of what I experienced, and whether that means that what came prior was necessary in some way or not is really in the realm of speculation. All we can really say is, right, that was the journey as it unfolded
Yeah.
for Dan, to the
Uh-huh.
point that Dan saw that Dan was a figment of his imagination.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it just happened that way. And
Yeah,
that's beautiful. That's I mean, what else is more beautiful? How
indeed.
was it like it was it so you had moments, I'm sure,
Mm,
before then of seeing you described it as a rigpa. I've heard that term too.
mm.
Uh, and I think it's a Dzogchen term
Yeah, that's
where
right.
you see you see the full view, right? And there can be times where you it seems like you're seeing the full view, uh, but in this moment on that walk, from then on, you knew it was so profound that maybe you couldn't unsee it in some way.
Indeed. Indeed.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So in many traditions, right, they talk about glimpses
Yeah.
versus a conclusive realization, right? And so that was what occurred on that walk home on that sunny day. I could remember it well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it just stayed that way.
Yeah, it was really impossible to identify with things as I had previously after that point.
Right.
Um, thoughts would continue to come and go in all of their variety. Although I will say there was a profound quieting of the mind, actually, um, though very much as uh, an indirect result of that realization as opposed to anything that I was trying to do. So it's really interesting to consider, I'd spent a lot of time trying to quiet the mind, trying to gladden the mind, doing those things deliberately as applied skills. Very wholesome, wonderful practices,
Mm,
but a lot more coarse than simply relaxing into those qualities as one's nature.
right.
Mm, mm,
Mm. This reminds me of something I've had in common with you, and that's
mm.
probably many years before this, or some years before this. You had an experience with MDMA,
Yeah.
and then I'll tell my story. So I'll back in 2014, I had an experience for the first time with MDMA with
Mm,
a couple of friends of mine back in
mm,
US. I was in college there, and um, and before then, I had done all this stuff. Another thing I have in common with you, I think, of exposing myself to social situations. So I want to overcome my social anxiety
mm,
when I was 18, 19, and did things to embarrass myself to become more socially free.
mm, mm.
So I went out on the street with a idiot sign and a underwear outside of my pants and
Amazing.
just for embarrassing myself on purpose.
Yeah.
Let
Yeah. It's
find
powerful practice.
yeah,
Yeah. Powerful.
exposure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and um, and that definitely worked in some way because then I could then I created kind of this possibility in my mind that I could do things that were out of the norm.
Mm,
So
mm,
trained my social skills and my social freedom and confidence. But when I took MDMA, there was it was a different game. Uh, it
yeah.
was uh, it was like because I'd done so many things to sort of without really being conscious of it to control an interaction and
Mm,
control myself and actually other people also.
right.
In a way. So, but with this stuff, this experience, I was just myself. There was a heart opening that I'd never felt
Mm,
before,
mm,
and
mm,
I just knew that this is a more profound way of interacting with people.
mm,
And, I wished there was a way to also make that a sober experience. Um, so but I felt that. I felt that I just needed to kind of open this heart more or whatever
yeah.
I had to do. Um, and um, and would you say that that experience there is kind of that way? I know you have additional, there's no ecstasy in the body. Like maybe there's no serotonin production overwhelmingly productive at the moment, all times. But what would you say
Mm,
is similar to that
mm.
state of, for example, taking MDMA?
Well, you and I came out of those experiences with exactly the same hypothesis, brother. Right? Is it
Yeah,
possible to be this happy and open and empathic without ingesting drugs? that really became the hypothesis. And that occurred long before I ever really started dabbling in meditation, even certainly long before I really entered into the Dharma.
Hmm.
But that's a very powerful experience, right? It's like a sneak preview of how things could be. And it was so powerful for me that I kind of thought, well, even if the answer is no, even if it's not possible to be this happy, this open, this free without ingesting drugs, I want to find out.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Right? So what happened for me then was, I followed that hypothesis and made some great progress. And actually, this must have occurred prior to even discovering the non-dual teachings. But I had later experiences with MDMA where actually there was very little difference, if any. I would feel a body buzz, but there was no change in happiness, openness, empathy because I'd raised the baseline
Right.
by means of practice. So
Yeah.
that really confirmed then, oh, it is possible. It is possible. And
Yeah.
that's a powerful way of talking about it. Maybe worth bringing out in some writing. I have written about it before, but it might be worth bringing a little more front and center. Of course, we always want to be careful around the subject of drugs. Uh,
Yeah.
Certainly, I don't encourage drug use. I actually don't think it's necessary, but it would be a lie to deny how important, significant an experience that was for me, and it sounds like for you as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think that definitely started pushing things in that direction. There were some other things too, like reading Eckhart Tolle a couple of years before then,
Mm-hmm.
and some other things. But so like now I can't say that I'm in an MDMA. I'm not, but maybe probably closer, definitely closer. But
Mm.
do you feel that that shift from that walk was like that was a significant difference? There's like I talked to a guy I know, Frode Gåsland, a meditation teacher. He says I asked him what was the difference between being 99% awake and then 100% awake. Those are the words I used. Okay, I'm not sure if
Sure.
you use them, but he
Mm.
said the difference was 100%. That was the 100% difference. And you're smiling, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's a very cool way to think about it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I could map that. That sounds accurate. What a beautiful way to say it.
yeah,
Because yes, as long as we still have, in a way of saying, one toe in samsara, one toe in reification, one toe in thinking that we're a permanent somebody,
yeah,
then that of course has a, to use Buddhist terminology, that has a karmic impact, right?
yeah. Because you're like you know somewhere or you think somewhere in the mind that I'm not totally free, or
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not actually free.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right. It's not
I'm
freedom
good, but
unless it's total freedom, right?
yeah,
It's either
yeah,
freedom or it's not. Yeah. Yeah.
right,
So you
yeah,
you might feel a lot better a lot of the time. You might be less terrorized by your own mind. You might be able to attenuate that suffering. But yeah, another way I suppose to talk about this shift would be it became clear to me at one time. I would say this was around the time of that profound shift. I really realized I don't care what the mind does.
yeah,
The
yeah,
mind can do anything and it won't perturb me. The heart can do anything and it won't perturb me. It won't knock me off. It won't cause me to panic. It won't lead to that spiral of discursive thinking, those stories that we tell ourselves. Artem calls it dreaming,
yeah,
right? The Tibetans call it reifying. Um, that's where the true freedom came for me, was realizing that there is nothing that could occur that could bother me. And then indirectly, the mind settles down because the game is up, right? It,
mm,
it in to personify the mind, of course,
Yeah.
it sees that it can't get its hooks into you anymore, in a way of
Oh yeah,
speaking,
yeah. So it'll be
right?
like if you're talking to someone and they're throwing shit at you, you could kind of see it as testing.
Right,
And
right.
but you're like, okay, you can throw anything at me.
Yeah,
And when they realize they can really throw anything at you if they want to,
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
then they give up. There's no point in
indeed. And
throwing things
usually
at
end
them.
up liking you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, oh,
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
Would you also say that the moment you had before that shift, I'm sure there were moments, maybe many moments, when you felt complete and free, uh, or did you realize later that okay, those moments were actually not freedom?
Mm. I would
If
call
that
them
makes sense.
glimpses. I like that word glimpse,
Okay.
right? A glimpse of freedom, a glimpse of what it might be like to be free.
Mhm.
Um, I was always erring on the side of caution with regard to my journey, my progress, my practice, my degree of realization. I tended to be checking things out not only with Dhammarato through the time that I was working closely with him, but also against multiple sources. I tended to be skeptical. In fact, I was always skeptical of anything that could have been described as spirituality. Up
Mhm.
until 2014, when I started to kind of open to it, I was fiercely skeptical, very much a materialist.
Mm.
Now it was discovering then that actually authentic spirituality does not clash with rationalism, with materialism, with any of that. It merely puts it in its place and says, well,
Right.
materialism is relatively real,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
Fine,
Yeah.
fine. That was what made the difference for me, right? You don't have to stop doing your chores. I had all these naive assumptions about what spirituality would be like, right? You don't have to go and live in a cave. You don't have to
No.
divorce your family,
Uh-huh.
right?
Uh-huh.
Right?
No.
You
Yeah.
don't have to never drink a beer. You don't have to give up swearing.
Right.
All these,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
These images that kind of come of what we see in kind of mainstream representations of spirituality that are just
Mm.
nonsense, right? I mean, it's just more ego.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Once
Mm.
I once
Yeah.
I discovered that, oh, I don't have to stop manifesting as Dan, right? If anything, I'm more Dan than I ever was because,
Yeah.
right, that expression is completely free and unrestricted.
Yeah. That
Right.
is when you can
Yeah.
be whoever
Yeah.
you are.
Yeah. Yeah. We all love, don't we, hanging out with people who aren't censoring themselves, who aren't trying too hard, right? And paradoxically, that's what we experience as charisma. That's what we experience as personality. We want to
Mm.
be around that genuine expression. Um,
Mm.
and of course, the great paradox is it comes from completely letting go and just not trying at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm, mm,
This YouTube channel here, FreddyFairhair, was built because on some of the principles of the aspiration to be free of
mm,
free in one's expression,
mm,
despite the fear or judgment of other people,
mm.
uh,
Beautiful.
and uh, and live the life and do the things and say the things you want to say, um, despite what people might think against it.
Mm,
And
beautiful.
uh, and then eventually, I felt in me that well, I did a lot of these social stunts, right? So uh, one outrageous thing I did was I I took off all my clothes, and I went up to women. This is 12 years ago, I think now. Um, in broad daylight,
Wow.
in the middle of the city, naked.
Wow.
I was naked, approaching women and asking
Wow.
their phone numbers.
Wow.
And
So is the law on your side for that stuff in wherever you were doing it?
sorry.
Is the law on your was the law on your side wherever you would, because I
Ah,
know in some places that would just be straight up illegal, right?
yeah, yeah. It's technically illegal to,
Okay.
but it's or I'm not sure actually. We did call the cops. A friend of mine, he was asking for
Hmm.
a friend, asking them, will it be will my friend, he's thinking about streaking or being naked in public, will he be arrested? Will he lose his uh, eligibility for entering the United States again?
Right.
Because I was
Right.
in college there.
Okay.
And they said, well, if he, the cops will, the police will come and ask him to take on his clothes. And if he doesn't cooperate, then he will go to the station. If he still doesn't cooperate, they might prison him. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Right.
pretty fair,
Yeah.
fair
Yeah.
game.
Well,
So,
dude, what an
yeah,
amazing stunt. I mean, I would call that a practice.
yeah, yeah. And it was,
Uh,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Profound. Yeah.
yeah. It was a great practice in letting go as like it's like a symbolic
Yeah.
action. I was
Yeah.
telling myself that I want to do this, and but that will mean that I will have to let go of a lot of things. Like maybe maybe I will never get a normal job that I wouldn't like anyway
Hmm. Hmm.
after this.
Yeah.
Um, there are definitely people will say it's like it's a symbolic ritual for like choosing a life of freedom,
Right.
of authenticity.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Powerful.
and and but even then, and it felt amazing, felt incredibly freeing. But uh, a year later or so, I realized that, and I kept doing stunts until I found myself on a stadium where I was about to streak a football game. It was during the World Cup in Brazil. It was USA against Belgium, and but I there was too much resistance for me to jump over the fence and actually do it. I'm glad I
Hmm.
didn't do it, by the way.
Okay.
Uh, I
Okay.
think I would have. I think it was. I think I. I'm not sure, but if I ruined that game, uh, that would not be something.
Hmm. Kind
Yeah,
of higher stakes than just approaching one person, right? Huge event,
yeah,
televised. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So anyway, if it happened, I'm sure I would have learned something about that too, about
Sure.
myself and all that. But that's when I realized that I had maybe a limit. I couldn't be this identity of the world's most daring person.
Okay.
So I wanted to know. Um, I knew freedom had to be beyond that. So
Mm, mm,
that's when I went down the path with dedication. That's when it
right.
just it took over me.
Mm, beautiful. And when was that, brother?
That was 2014.
Okay. Okay. So we're on a really similar timeline, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's 10, 11 years. That's about when you what happened in 2014 again for you? That was
Yeah, so that was just the
guided
beginning of
meditation.
dabbling with guided meditations, a little bit of reading here and there. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's
2015 was actually I kind of missed this out. 2015 was not just the Alexander technique stuff, but also that kind of led me to one of the wonderful effects of that Alexander technique practice was I stopped procrastinating so much. It really put a dent in my procrastination tendency.
mm,
And one of the things I've been procrastinating on was listening to more Alan Watts. I'd heard a couple talks and thought, oh, there's value here for me, but procrastination, I just didn't go any further. Well, through
mm,
2015, first half of 2015, I spent 6 months listening to every Alan Watts talk I could get my hands on. And
yeah,
then I heard Alan Watts talking about this guy Ramdas. So then I hopped over to Ramdas for the latter 6 months of that year and just kind of swallowed everything they'd done
yeah,
whole. It was
yeah,
quite amazing. So that was a really significant period actually. There were a lot of shifts during that period, even though all of that really was just kind of preliminary, I suppose we might say, psychological or worldview shifts. I hadn't really started a dedicated practice, but those shifts were nonetheless huge compared to where I'd been.
yeah. Huh.
Mm.
That was you said you stopped procrastinating, and that was that procrastinating in terms of the meditation and the practices,
Just in general,
or in
doing
general.
anything that was good for me, really.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of classic procrastination in its
Yeah.
broadest sense. Doing things that were good for my career, doing things that were good for my relationships, doing things that were good for me, all of it.
Right. Yeah. Because I think I'm procrastinating less nowadays, but I think I've had, you talked about having a withdrawal period. I was living kind of like a modern monk for 5 years,
Mm,
um, where it was only this that I was doing meditation. I was exercising,
hmm
I was traveling a little, um, but it was a lot of withdrawing.
mm,
And then the past 4 years have been more slowly entering the world again.
mm,
But it's
mm, mm,
still there's something in me that resists
mm,
uh, uh, doing things, but they seem to slowly also get resolved. I don't remember why I started telling that story about the naked approaching women, but it leads me into you had this you told a story somewhere where uh, you experienced there was maybe one main or one biggest block
mm.
for you to find what you were looking for or to
Yeah,
find fulfillment,
yeah,
and
yeah.
uh, and that was around intimacy.
Mm.
Tell that story again.
Sure, sure. So I was with an ex-girlfriend throughout most of my 20s. So I was in a stable relationship there, and it was a good relationship. It ended because really we lost the romance.
Mm,
That had provided a kind of shield for me from my issues. I would realize in retrospect that I had those issues all the way through that relationship. Where I became aware of these issues was following that relationship gradually throughout the period between that ex-girlfriend and my wife. And I was dating around and kind of exploring that issue
yeah,
with intimacy.
yeah.
Um, I had a meditation, and I'll struggle to date this, but I had a meditation in which I experienced a spontaneous encounter with little Dan, as I came to
Mm,
call him, my 4 or 5 year old self on the school playground, standing at the edge of the playground was little Dan, and he was watching all the other kids play a game called Kiss Chase, which is really what it says on the tin. And I wrote, didn't I, that I actually did some research on this because in retrospect, it seemed quite odd to me. Tiny little kids running around the playground trying to plant a kiss on one another. Of course, nothing sexual, but it struck me that what they were doing, of course, was they were imitating the older people in their lives, right? That was where this game came from. But it doesn't show up in every culture, my research showed. Nonetheless, is a long-standing game for children in the UK. I have to wonder what schools are doing with it now because it sounds like exactly the kind of thing they would try to stamp out. But there's little Dan watching the other kids play and feeling very much like an outsider, like he was confused, he didn't understand what was going on. And I realized then, of course, shining the light of maturity and new wisdom on that past experience, that it was because I'd never seen the grown-ups in my life be intimate with one another at that
Mm.
age.
I had
Felt that
also not
it
seen
was the
that.
same for you.
Yeah,
Wow. Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
maybe I have something similar. I haven't met
Maybe.
little Fred in that way, in that same way, but
Right.
um,
Right. Super interesting, hey. I'd never clocked until that meditation how impactful that might have been for myself as a youngster. So that all came clear to me in that moment. Oh, of course, little Dan feels like an outsider. He doesn't know what's going on here. He's never seen anyone kiss anyone, right?
no.
Like on the cheek, that kind of thing. But not. I'd never seen a demonstration of man to woman or woman to man affection. So I took little Dan by the hand and I sat him down on one of the little benches, and this was all very vivid. I was there on that playground and I could remember the smallest detail. We had these square arrangements of benches to sit on with flower pots at the corners, kind of like brick structures built up. And I took him into one of these little kind of booths, if you like, and I said to him, "It's okay that you feel confused. All these other kids, they're copying things that they've seen their mums and dads do. And your mum and dad, our mum and dad, they don't do that. And that's okay. And so it's okay if this feels weird for you,
Mm,
but you'll get the hang of it. You'll figure this stuff out. I've figured it out, or I'm in the process of figuring it out at least."
mm,
And I gave him a big, tight hug, long hug. And then my meditation ended, and I integrated that experience over a couple of weeks and then was free of all of my issues around intimacy. And I saw during those couple of weeks, what I realized was how that formative experience led to a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of stacked experiences in which I felt undeserving of affection, like I was an outsider when
yeah,
it came to intimacy.
yeah, yeah,
Right. And so that had led to all kinds of awkward experiences in my youth that just confirmed for me, right? It was always a struggle to get female attention, I thought. Um, and then, when I did get it, I kind of didn't know what to do with it. And so this again, self-fulfilling
right.
prophecy, right? And then as we know on the other side, once we understand how attraction works, we see, well, yeah, of course no one's going to be attracted to someone who doesn't think they're attractive. That's how
No,
the game goes,
yeah,
right? And that's why it's so tricky for folks who are in that pattern. Why it was so tricky for me. But realizing all of that was all that was necessary. Really just shining the light of awareness on it was all that was necessary to dissolve all of that karma and come into freedom in that specific regard. Yeah.
yeah. It's amazing technology, what
Isn't it?
awareness and observation can do.
Yeah.
Uh, it's you know, the, the fact that you got to that seeing and the memory uh, came up. Um, it sounds like something that I have experienced in ayahuasca, for example.
Mm, mm,
But
mm.
this this happened very clearly for you during meditation, sober
Yeah.
meditation.
Yeah.
Was that after the shift or before?
Before.
That's before, yeah.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
year.
It could have been earlier that year, yes.
Yeah.
If I think about the timeline, it was 2016 when I broke up with that ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
I then got into something very brief that ended in tears. That was very difficult. And then I started to study dating and explore myself a bit more deliberately, how all of that worked, because I'd never looked into it. Having been in that relationship for so long, there was no need. Although perhaps in retrospect, if I'd looked into that stuff, maybe that relationship would have gone differently. But I'm glad it didn't, or I wouldn't have found my wife.
Right.
And there was other dating going on. Yeah, hard to date when that meditation took place, but it was before that profound shift into non-dual realization.
That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and yeah, it's interesting how you said it was like a stack of assumptions,
Mm.
experiences, the way you making this assumption that you have no idea what's going on here. You don't do that kind of stuff. You don't know what to do. You feel alienated from that kissing ritual,
Hmm.
which a lot of
Hmm.
people do to express their interest in each other,
Yeah.
and then you yeah, you have these awkward situations later, and they lead to more assumptions that women definitely don't like you, and I think that also totally has happened with me,
Mm.
and definitely people who are deliberately going out to become better daters or
Mm.
seduction
Mm. Mm.
uh, seducers.
Yeah, yeah, I dabbled with that whole scene,
Yeah,
shall we say. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Go out and then you, okay, as long as you see it this way, or you do this kind of gambit, and then they if they then don't give that response you want, then you make more conclusions that, all right, they don't like me for who I am. Or if they
Yeah.
did like the way you were dressing that particular night, I have to move away the cat here. Go away, cat. Then it creates more assumptions. So if they like the way you're looking, the stories you're saying, or the
Hmm.
techniques you're doing,
Hmm.
then that creates the assumption that uh, girls want it to be this way. I can't be myself.
Yeah.
Creates, it
Yeah.
doesn't help the wound to open up and heal.
Not
And
at all.
in this
Not
case,
at
with
all.
you,
Do you know what? That meditation experience must have been closer to when I met my wife, actually. It must have been closer to that profound shift. And here's why. I recall maybe it could have even happened after that shift. Huh. Or maybe the integration period was longer. This is
mm,
difficult to pin down, but I'll tell you why I'm thinking about this is because the website that I met my wife on is a website called OkCupid.
yeah,
And what I liked about OkCupid was that it allowed you to write a bit about yourself. So unlike the superficial swipers, there was a little bit of kind of personality involved instead of it just being purely about looks
mm,
and your little kind of elevator pitch, your little one paragraph bio.
okay,
Prior to meeting my wife, and for a long time, I had hesitated to write about my interest in the Dharma, mindfulness meditation, because I felt that it would turn a lot of women off. Back then, 2019, the conversation has progressed a lot, is more trendy now. Back then, I would still get funny looks from folks whenever I mentioned that I was a practitioner.
mm,
So out of fear, I
mhm,
didn't write about that, even though it was everything of who I was. I was completely immersed in all of that at that time.
Mm.
Following integration of that meditation experience, I ripped that profile down and just wrote honestly, uncensored, unabashed, just exactly who I was and what I was interested in. It was
Cool.
2 weeks after that that I met Debbie, and something else that accompanied that moment was that the number of women that I would message in a day skyrocketed. Where previously I'd send a few messages out and feel very like, will I get something back? Will I, won't I? Right? Attached
Uh-huh.
to outcome.
Mm.
Following that profile rewrite, I would just send out 50, 60 messages a day
Wow.
with no regard to what came back. And then, sure enough, at some point, I get a message back from my future wife, and she's saying, "Oh, you're into mindfulness. I'm here to study psychology. We should talk."
Mm.
So,
Mm.
and that really was like, that was the closure. That was the completion of that hero's journey,
Yeah.
because it showed me finally that it is about compatibility. It is not about who is objectively more attractive than whoever else, right? Kind of old conventional wisdom. There's someone for everyone, all of that kind of stuff is really true. It turned out to be precisely about compatibility. That was why I ended up with my wife. Previously, I would have felt like I was punching well above my weight with my wife.
Mm.
But seeing that compatibility is the important factor. I saw, no, we are able to offer one another what we each want. And that was what led to a very strong and solid relationship.
Beautiful story. It's like
Mm.
uh it's like a true love story,
Yeah,
a hero's journey. You completed
yeah,
that hero's journey
yeah,
with that meeting in the end with your wife.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's like you were finally ready to share yourself. Do you feel that?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Mm.
Before it would be more thinking, should I write this? How should I appear?
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
that must be wonderful. I'd love
Yeah.
to get in a state like that, and I think
Mm,
I will.
mm.
Um,
Wonderful. Good.
how are you with time now? Are you
I think if we were to maybe spend a little time talking about, I know you said you wanted to cover some of the financial side. We
uh-huh.
could spend a little while on that, and then yeah, I've got plenty to do.
Yeah. Okay.
Now I can actually tie us in here, which is that
Hmm.
once I started to study business, marketing, sales, offer creation, I discovered enormous parallels between dating and business.
Okay.
Such that when you were talking about, right, that vision of us guys who kind of went out to experiment and talk to women and see what worked and what didn't work, etc. What I was thinking, the word that was going through my mind there was what in business is called packaging. How
Uh-huh.
you package something is
Mm.
everything, right? Because the new person who encounters the thing doesn't know anywhere near as much about the thing as you do. You know everything about the thing. That's why you're packaging it. All
Right.
they see is the package. So where that dude on a night out who's struggling is taking all of his interactions to be a reflection on him, he's wrong because the people he's interacting with don't know him. They only know the package. They only know that snapshot of him,
Yeah.
right? And so it turns out that the package is enormously important. And this, of course, is true in business as well.
Yeah.
Mm,
Sell them what they want and give them what they need, right? You s-
precisely.
I've
Precisely.
I've heard that before, but I also heard you say it.
It's a great one. And actually, that reminds me of a quote from someone who I suspect you're familiar with, an OG in the guys dating space, Owen Cook, who said
Yeah.
to a crowd one time, "The most valuable thing I could give you today is awakening, but I can't sell that to you because you don't know what it is."
He said that. Okay.
He said that. He said that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, of course, he
Hmm.
sells the dating stuff, the self-improvement stuff as a gateway to those deeper teachings that he has. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know he said it that way, or he has
Yeah,
said
right.
those
Yeah.
words. Um,
Yeah, that was quite unusual language for him, I would say. He doesn't often talk about awakening. Certainly these days he's talking more about the Bible. Um, but
mm,
he's used Eastern terminology here and there, and he's certainly familiar with it. So that really
mm,
resonated for me. And
mm,
I've thought about that a lot in this business endeavor that I've been working on for 2.5 years now.
mm.
In as much as if I just go on social media and start blasting non-dual insight, I mean, I've tried it. It just flops. People can't
Right.
hear it,
No.
right?
Okay.
So it's about using those skillful means, as the Buddha called it,
Mhm.
to lead people in to meet people where they are.
Hmm. For me, when I talk about non-duality and spiritual practice, there's so much out there already. So
Mm,
I'm not I'm falling through. And in fact, I don't feel totally qualified as much as, a lot of the people I listen to. But when it
mm,
comes to something like, if I niche it down to social freedom, uh, I'm sure I can. That's also, I will also say what Owen Cook said, that the most
yeah,
powerful thing I can teach you is awakening, to be free. If you want to be socially free, you have to be free from the mind,
mm, hmm hmm
uh, because the
yeah,
anxiety, that's where the anxiety is,
yeah,
and the where you limit yourself.
mm,
So
mm,
so, but yeah, I wonder how to do that. Like, but thanks. That's like a great. I feel that's a confirmation if I really take it in that I can actually move the content in that direction, like the
yeah,
programs I'm doing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I've heard the term Trojan horse has come up a lot in business strategy, so
Uh-huh.
that you would use social freedom as the horse, but inside the
Mhm.
horse is the full teaching on awakening. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And if you
yeah,
don't quite feel qualified to give the full teaching, well, there's ways to navigate that, you know.
right. Yeah.
Mm.
Mm. Um, I mean, maybe there's a question I can shoot in the end here. Because I think the most important thing about the business stuff was, would you say it's about being ready to help people and
100%.
then just yeah, go out there and start talking to people. It sounds like that's your
100%.
model.
100%. So in exactly the same way, brother, as you just said, you will gain social freedom by figuring out freedom, the
Yeah,
wholeness of freedom.
yeah,
In the same way, we will figure out how to get when we figure out how to give. We will
yeah.
we will find the success that we want in by worldly measures by first finding the success that we need at the
Uh-huh.
supramundane level, at the non-dual level, right?
Yeah,
Stephen
right.
Covey, legendary uh, success teacher, wrote that book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. He wrote that private victories must precede public victories. Private victories must come first. We have to win those private victories. If we don't, then our success in the world will be short lived because it's built on sand.
Yeah.
right? Now, I came to the social media game way later than I could have. I'm surrounded by 20 something year olds who are flying at this stuff. And I'm here at 38 playing the long game because I refuse to sacrifice that deeper message. And that's not the easiest path in a way of speaking. What is easy is that all I'm really doing is thinking, how can I help people? That's all I really do. And even to say it that way is that sounds too deliberate. As we go deeper and deeper into freedom, as we make these kinds of realizations that the Buddha encouraged us and other great teachers encouraged us to make, compassion becomes the only game in town. Service becomes the only game in town, right? And it's naturally arising. The Tibetans talk about awareness as naturally arising beneficial intent,
Mm-hmm.
or rather, that intent would be a facet of timeless awareness. Ensured from the beginning, it's natural. It's we don't have to do anything to conjure up that compassion. And so, what could be more powerful as a business strategy? Well, if I just have an unending fountain of compassion, I just want to come out here and serve. That's pretty powerful stuff. So, what that looks like in practical terms is I wake up each morning full of ideas. I
Mm-hmm.
have the leanest morning routine I've ever seen. Get straight to my desk and just go to work. And I work until I've spent all of my mental energy for the day, and then I rest.
Right.
Weekends I chill out with my wife. If if I weren't with my wife, I probably would run a 7 day structure, and I would probably just finish my days a little bit sooner and go into rest a little bit sooner and spread the work out across 7 days because really there's no division between work and leisure for me. I enjoy the work
Mm.
arguably more than I enjoy leisure.
Yeah.
So is it
Makes
really
sense.
work at that point, you know?
Mm.
Um,
So in
so
practical terms,
sorry.
you wake up, and what is it that you do, or what do you teach? If you care to share something, I know you share a lot on
Mm,
your website, so I'll
mm.
link to the website.
Sure.
Uh,
So, well, the first thing that I would teach someone to do is the alignment piece. Then, of course, if they struggle to find alignment, then I'm going to encourage them towards spiritual practice, right? So it all kind of comes along for the ride.
yeah.
But actually, a lot of clients that I'm working with these days have already done their work spiritually. And they
Mm.
come to me because they see someone who's just a little bit ahead of them in the business game, um, but that speaks their language. And so we just talk about alignment. Hey, what is the one change that you want to see in the world? Right? And a fun thought experiment here. This also comes from Stephen Covey is to imagine yourself at your funeral as a spectator and
Mm.
ask, what do you want the speakers to say about you?
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So what,
Okay.
how can we orient you to that greatest contribution? And if this is too contrived, it's not going to work, and people tie themselves up in knots at this stage if they haven't already done the spiritual work. But for those who have done the spiritual work first, they find it quite easily, actually, with a few focused leading questions. We hone in on that one change that they most want to see in the world.
Yeah.
And typically, that's something that they're qualified to make happen. It's going to be that that one change that they want to see in the world is going to be what they've been thinking about for the past 2 years at least. Typically more like
Yeah.
5 or 10, right? For you and I, this has been a long journey. So once we've found that, then we ask a few kind of more tactical questions like, okay, what are people currently helping people with already for money that is something that you could provide, right? So, for example, I'm working with someone right now who's just going to coach mindfulness like I did in the beginning before I started coaching the business stuff. We know that people are selling coaching on mindfulness in
Yeah.
various forms. So he's on a profitable niche there. And so we optimize his social media profile around that problem solution transformation that he's promising. Make it clear to people who visit his profile what he's about, what he can help them with, what they're going to get out of clicking follow.
Yeah.
We put out content that focuses on that problem solution transformation. People show up in the comments section demonstrating that they need help. He reaches out to those people and he offers help. That's the business model.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Mm.
he offers help and says, "Hey, let's talk."
Yeah.
And then he has an offer, right? Uh,
Well,
or does he bring the offer in the chat, or
he
jump on the
brings the offer in
call?
the chat. So what I'm recommending to people to do as beginners is to remain very flexible. One of the things that I struggled with in the beginning, especially if, as I was, in the case that someone is coming to this as a Dharma dude,
Huh?
our capacity to help people is vast. We really can help anyone with anything, pretty much, right? Of course, specialized skills aside,
Mhm.
right? Anything to do with, I cringe at the term life coach, but it's really that same kind of breadth that we're talking about. Um,
Yeah.
the struggle that represented for me was, how do I make an offer? I feel like I can help so many people with so many things because I help myself with so many things, from intimacy to stress to bodily tension to just all of it. The whole problem that the Buddha singled out, the problem of dissatisfaction, suffering, stress, dukkha.
Yeah.
So I played around with making various offers and I sold a cohort course on mindfulness. That was my first success. But I've always had a passion for coaching. I love being in front of someone and really working with them and seeing the transformation. And I taught music for 20 years, so I find it very easy. What I found was that no matter what I wrote down as my coaching offer, I would always flex on that offer once I was actually talking to a person. So in the end, I just gave up on writing offers down. And instead, what I have is a list of 10 questions that I draw from in conversation with someone to find out what they're struggling with, find out, first of all, if I can help them, then how I can help them, and then I make a clear prescription, a length of time, a way that we will work together, and a result that we will end up at, and then make my offer. But the offer is created on the fly, so to speak, per
Uh,
individual. And this is uniquely suited to beginners because what beginners don't have is traffic. So if the beginner wants to start by making a broad offer to a lot of people, say they want to sell a pre-recorded course, well, the problem with that is you have to guess at what a bunch of people are going to want. You have to write your landing page ahead of time, and you can't adjust it per individual that lands on that page, right? Whereas if you sell coaching, people expect to pay more for one-to-one attention. So you only have to sell to one person in the beginning,
yeah.
right? Rather than trying to find traffic from who knows where, trying to sell who knows how many units of a $99 course, for example.
Uh,
And you're much more likely to give that person something that they really need, something that has value to them because you can create that offer on the fly.
right. Yeah. Yeah. I've used free first sessions, and then I've created programs around each individual person
So
myself. But
yeah, so actually if I've done any free sessions, they probably could be counted on one hand. I've found that it's not
okay.
been necessary where the perception of value is accurate. Now, a lot of that in the early stages was about me figuring out what is my value proposition.
Okay.
And that has become more and more focused, more and more clear as I've gone on. Right now, the kind of leading value proposition that I run with is that I help people to establish a minimum viable service in 60 days. So this is an educational offer. I'm teaching people to get to the point where they're ready to begin making money online through social media with a service specifically.
Yeah.
No,
Exciting.
yeah, isn't it? Very
Yeah.
exciting. And that's the result of many, many permutations of different wording, different offers. You know, the words become so important out here in this noisy attention marketplace.
Yeah.
But one of the spiritual teachers that I've actually looked to as a role model is Michael Singer with his surrender experiment, who
Yeah.
just did what's in front of him to the best of his ability, right? So I didn't come out here. I started my Twitter account August 2022. I had no idea that I would end up teaching business. No idea. I came out to teach the Dharma. But
Yeah.
through doing that, what occurred was, well, other Dharma dudes just started coming to me and saying, hey, I just rocked up here. You seem to be doing pretty well. Can you teach me what you've been doing? And so this is a great way to run any business, right?
Yeah.
Let a demand present itself almost and then fulfill that demand as opposed to trying to create a demand.
Right. Well, that's a great introduction for what Dan is teaching on his website called dangoldfield.com, right?
That's right.
You'll read a lot of cool blog posts there about how to set yourself up for a free for financial freedom or for a free lifestyle, making an income with where you don't have to do something you're not meant to do, you know. So it was so many good moments here, and I really look forward to look over this podcast again. Inspirational on many levels. So deeply thank you, Dan, for taking your time to do this. It was
Thank you, Fred.
great meeting you.
Great to be with you, brother. Great to meet you too. Thanks for the conversation.
So many it's so confirming here to talk for me personally, because there's so many things here that are similar. So it gives me a lot of faith, you know, that things work out. Things work out. If it hasn't worked out already, it can still keep working out.
Yeah, indeed. Good. I'm glad you found this so useful, brother.
Yeah, I did. So thanks again. Take care, everyone.